This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Dennis Stevens. He is a visionary leader and a seasoned consultant with over 3 decades of experience at the intersection of technology, innovation, and organizational leadership. Beginning his career in the United States Marine Corps, Dennis honed an appreciation for what can be accomplished with well-formed teams, clarity of purpose, and effective leadership. His entrepreneurial spirit led him to found multiple companies, including Responsive Software Solutions, Synaptus, and Knowledge and Process, where he integrated software solutions with business strategies and spearheaded significant business transformation initiatives. He also started a company called LeadingAgile, and his current project is called Org Right. Dennis is a sought-after speaker and thought leader known for his insights on overcoming common pitfalls in organizational transformation, the importance of executive buy-in, and the future of work in the age of AI. His approach moves beyond isolated team successes, addressing the critical need for executive leadership to foster environments where true scalability and adaptability can thrive. So, Dennis, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, let's just give our listeners a little context here. I read a little bit in the bio, but why don't you just fill us in kind of where you grew up and where you went to school and just kind of give us the basics so we can get started.
Yeah, I started out at Florida State University on a violin performance scholarship. And just turned out I wasn't very talented at the violin and wanted to keep school getting paid for, so I left and joined the Marine Corps. They offered to pay for the rest of my education. My dad had been a Marine, so it was not that big of a leap. Coming out of the Marine Corps, I joined the Marine Corps Reserve and started working. I went to University of Georgia for a little while and started working building software programs. And some of the really interesting things that I learned early on were most of the people that are building software, they really just look at it as a technical problem, not as an organizational problem. And for some reason, my ability to look at the problem, probably from my logistics experience in the Marine Corps, was we're trying to accomplish a goal. Things are sort of complicated. How do we do that? I became a very good developer early on. Built some really big systems, rolled them out nationally for IBM. Got activated for Desert Storm, had to start another company, came back and built another one, sold it to Perot. But really, I was a very strong individual performer. To see technical problems, figure out how to solve them, and bring technology to bear. It was shortly after my second sale that I realized that the real ability to grow and scale a company was in creating teams that could do it for you, so you don't have to do all the work yourself. I had some good insights in that, but I was able to again bring from some of my sports history, some of my music, about what it looks like to have a good, cohesive, strong team, and start trying to create the conditions for organizations to deliver software effectively. So my next endeavor was a thing called Synaptus, and I helped Microsoft build their business architecture practice. We were talking about how to design organizations around capabilities so the technology and organizations could align, and you could move sort of rapidly in different directions. I have an HBR article called The Next Revolution in Productivity about some of that work, really saying what are the strategically important places to go? How do you get your organization aligned to solve it? How do you get your technology to enable the organization to deliver on that strategy? And to me, it kind of made sense, but it wasn't super common in the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and you know, I'm intrigued. So tell us a little bit about. So you're in the U.S. Marines.
Yep.
You know, you started, a violin scholarship. Those are 2 pretty different worlds. So tell us, what did you learn in the Marine Corps that you think transcribed well to building teams in business and making that work?
I believe that sports and music and the Marine Corps all have a very, very common flavor of teamwork and alignment on mission and clarity of purpose. I think that's easy to create though when you're in an orchestra where you've got a conductor, the music, the rules are clear. Where's everybody heading? I think it's easy to do on a sports team. I played sports, I played rugby. It's easy to know a sports team when you know the rules of the game and the team, when it is cohesive, works together. In the Marine Corps, they teach a lot of skills about how to explicitly do that with your teams and how to develop you. You see, maybe not when you're young and you're in it, but you can look back later and say they developed you into being a leader, being able to see your team, being able to create cohesion and alignment around it. Cohesion becomes a really important word for me. It's all those pieces fitting together towards the goal. And it's looking at the bigger picture than just individual effort. So I think the sense of mission from the Marine Corps was a critically important aspect of what I learned there. But I think those three things are not as diverse as they appear on the surface between sports and the Marine Corps and playing music.
So do you still play music? A violin?
Got my violin over there. I've got my guitar back here.
Okay, great, great. Because I think it is really interesting when you think of, so the reason I'm kind of intrigued about this is I'm a guitar player myself. So, you think of in the violin, and I've never played the violin, but, I assume there's probably two approaches. One is to kind of master the classics, which would be very um, left brain analytical, dig the ditch, get it down, whatever. And then there's that other side where you create and write music and you innovate and you just kind of go with the flow. So I can see both sides of that, but I do think it's interesting because we've had a lot of discussions in this program about, right brain thinkers and left brain thinkers and
Right.
and how that works, and there's maybe a trend towards more right brain thinkers that are leading companies as we go forward. Where in the past, I think it was very common to have left brain thinkers. So I'm just really intrigued with this because you go from music, maybe thinking that's gonna be your career, and then you go into finance. I mean, that just seems crazy, but maybe you approached music in a different way. Do you see where I'm getting at there?
Yeah, I think I was technically skilled. I worked really hard, was very disciplined, was very technically skilled at it. One of the things I think this right brain, left brain is important because I was good at the skill of music, but maybe not at the craft of it. I think in the Marine Corps, I got good at the skill of leadership, but maybe not the craft of it.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of an interesting emergence as we mature. And I also think it's interesting. One of the things I'll talk about is leading yourself versus leading others, and leading yourself for your own gain versus leading yourself versus leading the organization for the organization's gain. There's how you're playing. And I think the skill and the craft is different in each of those areas. The right brain, left brain, the self, the whole. And I don't think we spend a lot of time very intentionally understanding those are different skills and
Yeah.
different craft to operate in each of those quadrants.
Yeah. Well, and then it comes down to two, probably the best leaders are the ones who can do both, because you need the creative side and you need the relationship side and whatever, but also paying attention to detail and knowing exactly what's going on is extremely important as well.
And I think those skills are learnable on both sides. I think there are learnable skills on both sides.
Yeah. When you help companies transform and embrace this organizational change that you talk about, what does that task look like, and where do you start? So you go into a company, you know that you got the leader's attention, and they want to transform. That sounds like a big word, sounds like a complicated thing. So where do you start and how do you do this?
There's a model that I developed. I call it the influence trust loop. And you have to start on the influence side. I think it's a right brain, left brain model as well. But on the influence side, it's how you show up to the person you're talking to. It's how you create um, empathy with them and understanding their problem. It's creating a shared point of view about where you're trying to go and then creating safety for them. That's all on the influence side. To me, a lot of that is around, I call it creating a hole in the heart. Like I can have the right answer. I can have the trust side of this thing nailed all day long. But if there isn't a hole in the heart for the organization or for the leader to make that be successful, you're not going to get the traction that you need. And if you don't create safety around it, you're not going to get those. You can't start talking about the result and the benefit and the right answers. You have to understand what matters to them, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what they're weak at, and how you're going to support them through it. So that influence side of it is always the first side. It's casting a vision into the future of something that they want and that they can deem achievable within their constraints. You get over on the trust side and you start to operate in small loops because you don't earn all that trust all at once. You'll get like a little smidgen of an opportunity to prove something. On the trust side, you walk around and you do something successfully, demonstrate the results, and you increase your influence on the influence side a little bit. It becomes a self-feeding loop. I draw it often as an infinity sort of symbol.
Okay. And so how do you work or get clients like that? I would assume that most people aren't going to call you up and say, "Hey, I need to transform my company."
Yeah.
So do you start on a coaching aspect, or do you just how does it get from getting a contact, getting someone interested, and then really transforming their organization?
It's interesting. So the inflection point that I'm sitting at today, we were for 12 years at LeadingAgile, we ran a couple hundred transformations. We designed and led them. Those calls that were coming in were from people saying, we want to transform, we want to operate differently because we told the story. So it was interesting was we were selected by people because of our marketing that wanted to transform.
Okay.
Often not everybody in the organization wanted to. In fact, typically there were some people that did, some people that were skeptical, some people that were resistant, but we got brought in by the people that wanted it to work. The thing that I'm looking at today in OrgRight is I don't think that we can use external agents to do these massive restructuring transformations anymore because change is happening too fast. It's too expensive. You already see that transformation market suffering in the industry. People are not hiring for it as much. So I believe the goal now is to get it into middle management, into leadership, to build those transformation skills into the leaders on the ground. So organizations can be more in sort of a continuous innovation, continuous adaptive mode.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So describe what, you've described or you've said before, when you said, what is a resilient and adaptable organization? Tell us what that means in your words.
There's got four attributes that I would look for. The first one is coherence. And it's that idea, does your structure and your strategy and your technology align in a way that you can connect them to delivering value to your customers or achieving your strategy? A lot of organizations are very project-based or very siloed, and there's not a lot of cohesion in the organization with the strategy. You can go look at an organization's stated strategy and its investment budget, and you can see that what they say they're trying to get better at or where they're trying to compete is not where they're spending dollars. That's a lack of cohesion. So getting that cohesion is the first one. The second one is, I call it informed awareness, and it's getting relevant information in the hands of people that are making the decisions. The example I'll give you is when I was a 19-year-old in logistics, I was making relatively sophisticated, responsible decisions in a very complex network of things, but I had the information, the skills and training that I needed to make those decisions. We see in big organizations that very little information gets disseminated even to middle management, much less down to the actual decision makers. And so all the decisions end up bubbling up to the top and having to be addressed and handled by senior executives. It becomes a problem, makes it a less resilient organization. So informed awareness is about figuring out who needs which information to make a decision and how do you get it there, and then how do you create the feedback loops to make sure that you're able to steer and guide those decisions that are being made. There's a cadence or a rhythm, an operating rhythm that has to be in place, that has to be tighter than the adaptability you're looking for. If you're doing annual budgeting, but your market is changing every quarter, you're going to struggle. So the rhythm of the organization has to be aligned. That's real easy to look at, change. And the last one is just this concept of your leaders have to be effective at strategic empowerment. The leaders have to be able to delegate things into teams with clarity, knowing the teams can perform them, gain feedback from them, and then measuring the results as it's coming out. Leaders are responsible for creating those conditions so that strategic empowerment can take place.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by your story because I just see, it seems like you grew up in a pretty, maybe middle America family, and then you had some jobs early, that were just kind of hourly jobs, and then you're a violin player, you go into the Marine Corps, you've had how many companies? Five or six that you've
This is the sixth
created
one. Yeah,
and
sixth one.
sold and have that side. So I'm just intrigued with the story and do you see that each step of the way is just something that came naturally to you, or were you very, very goal oriented, or how do you how do you get started and end up where you are today?
I think I'm extremely interested in things. So the work I did with Microsoft around services-oriented architecture, I saw the technology was dramatically changing how organizations would operate. I got an opportunity from work I'd done with a company that acquired me to go do this work with Microsoft, to use services-oriented architecture thinking to design organizations. People just weren't talking about it, but it was obvious to me that you couldn't move one without the others. So I had an opportunity to go work and build that, just really interested in that. We kind of got to the back end of that, and this transformation, business transformation, how do you get organizations to change? So we can redesign these, architect them differently, but organizations don't change. I started talking about and studying how to make organizations change. I met this guy, Mike Koppmeyer, brilliant businessman, super, super smart agilist. And we got together and started building this company, LeadingAgile, became, a $50 million consulting firm that grew over 12 years and did hundreds of really successful large scale transformations. But near the end of that, I just felt the latency of the work we were doing from transformation and where it wasn't changing. I realized we couldn't fight middle management. We couldn't fight leadership at organizations and move the speed they needed to transform it. Just became really interested in what it's going to take to change it. And I've started down this path of trying to figure that out and build it out into organizations. And I'm lucky enough to have had some success in what I've done in the past, to have the opportunity to actually go try to make some of it happen for people.
I think what you're touching on there is I would use the word curious. I think a lot of really good leaders are just very curious people, and they're always looking for something that interests them or something new and different, and how can we improve and whatever. And I think that's what you just described. So yeah, I think that's really interesting.
It's like the Ted Lasso scene. He's curious where he's throwing the darts. If you haven't seen it, look up Ted Lasso Curious.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
That's awesome. So now you're with your sixth company, Org Right. Tell us a little bit about exactly what that company does, and then my follow-up question to that would be, is this just another step on the road, or are you, um, is this the one that you stick with, or has it got something else brewing in that brain of yours?
Who knows what's next? I think that there's a well. First, I'll talk about Org Right. Org Right. The goal of Org Right is to figure out how to teach leaders the importance of thinking systemically and how to create more emergent leadership models, try to get away from really command and control, completely planned models. We did a ton of it in software with the Agile transformation space. Implementing all that technology as it's changing happens in big step changes in most organizations. How do we get that to happen more aggressively? So working on what are the ways, the sense making, the way that leaders have to think about problems in order to be better, effective change leaders in their organization. So they're not delegating out to an external agent or an external part of their organization, but building it more into the daily work and rituals of those leaders. So that's what I'm focused on. I want to deliver it through a series of cohorts and online training. And then the next thing is, and I think there's an AI piece behind it. I think there's a generative AI piece. I think one of the reasons why we can't delegate and let organizations operate the way that they need to move at the speed of the market is the information is too vast and too broad. By getting some really, really tight tools that can examine patterns and identify insights and help with the sense making of the leaders, we can get the right information further down into the organization and then verify that the organization as a whole is still cohesively moving in the right direction. So I think there's an AI play on the back end. It's very interesting to me to look at the inability to disseminate information and trust decision-making of the organization as being the constraint on adaptability today.
Yeah, it's just the information overload is immense. And, a lot of listeners on this program are in healthcare. So let's talk a little bit about AI in healthcare. So what do you know about that, and what do you think AI can do for that, which those of us from healthcare will be the first to admit is the most inefficient, archaic business model in the nation, and we need some help. So is it AI is the help we're looking for here?
So there's probably three different angles on it. One of the ones that I've been involved in recently with AI in healthcare is it's a competitive market, getting people to come to your hospital and attend your hospital and get their care at your hospital. Like that's a really important aspect. So the marketing aspects and the navigation, people are trying to find their way around. They're in a different place. It's really scary. How do you create a better experience? I think there's an awful lot of things that you can do with AI and following up on that. So there's an interesting marketing play. And there's some good products out there and some organizations that are doing some work in that area. There's the tracking of care and keeping people from coming back into the hospitals, I think is another really interesting space. We worked with a pharmaceutical company a few years ago on trying to get people to be with different social determinants and social backgrounds to be highly compliant with uh, their going home instructions. I think there's some interesting combination of devices now that can capture information, your watch, thing on your arm, that can capture information, can send it back, that can provide lots and lots of insights on whether people are following through. I think there's an AI play in monitoring adherence to did you go home and do the things you were supposed to do so we can keep you out of the hospital? I think that's a very interesting place that's
Yeah.
emerging. And then, of course, you see it in all the diagnostics, where the diagnostics are better at figuring out problems than humans are in some regard. They can train them, very narrow, very intently trained AI, which can improve the quality of diagnostics. But then there's these interesting challenges in the dynamics of the healthcare field, which is doctors want to make money, hospitals want to make money, the stakeholders want to make money. Does reducing demand for your service by solving these problems a certain way really serve a purpose? I think there's an interesting space in there that is going to make this a challenging problem to resolve.
Yeah, it's yeah, it comes back to the basic question is, should companies make money on healthcare, or is that something that just, should be provided and whatever. But then if you don't have the money there, do you lose the innovative part of it and so on? So
Yeah, it's all very complicated.
yeah, very complicated for sure. I look at, also AI in the regulatory world of healthcare. I mean, my gosh, just to try and keep track of what Medicare requires you to do and what, is happening on the research side and what's happening here. It's just impossible for any one person and even a team to keep up with. And so I do think that there are definitely ways that we could really help disseminate that information and get it into your organization without having to, you know, dig a ditch to find it, I guess.
Yeah, more and more people want to age in place, stay at home, get home healthcare delivered. I think there's a great play in that sort of management of care, uh, tracking of the codes to make sure that people aren't stealing money from the system, that people are taking their medicines right. There's a whole really interesting space that isn't hospital based, but it's the home healthcare industry. Tons of education, tons of reminders, notifications, little helpers for people to be successful. I think there's a huge future in that technology.
Yeah, yeah. And so your involvement with AI is just being aware of it. Or are you involved in the software development side of it? What is your role when it comes to AI?
My belief is that AI is going to dramatically change job design. It's going to change the way that we need to lead, the way we need to design individual jobs, which is then going to impact organizational design. So a lot of what we did with services-oriented architecture 15 years ago is going to come into play again, because as you go and redesign job jobs, you have to be able to look at the bigger picture. So the idea of looking beyond just the technology is an important aspect. It's very interesting to me. I've seen an organization that went and piloted a bunch of little AI initiatives in their organization and made some new offers to clients. And they sold a bunch of it because it was a great product. They couldn't bill it. It wasn't legal. They couldn't support it. They missed entire parts of their organization because they were successful looking at the little slice of the technology and the product idea. I think those sorts of spaces are very interesting. How do you keep organizations from making big mistakes, looking at the whole instead of treating AI as just a technology or data problem?
And I think that, we hear the negatives of AI and people are afraid of what it could be. And, I get some of that. But also, I'm curious because you're a curious guy, as we talked about, an innovator. You come up with all these ideas. So if we rely more and more on AI, do we lose that creativity side, do you think?
I don't think so. I actually don't think that AI is great at being creative right now. It's good at generating patterns. So
Yeah.
you're gonna see some of the creative jobs. There'll be job losses in the creative jobs, which were reproducing logos and doing things like that. But the real art is still gonna exist out there. So I think that doesn't change. I actually believe that to a certain extent, AI is going to require us to be more thoughtful. Because when you look at the jobs that AI can actually do for you, there's not a lot of them that it's going to take into 100%. So thinking about how to ask the questions right, how to check the data, how to set yourself up for success, how to leverage the technology, there's a lot of creativity. I'm messing with some video editing technology or video editing AIs. They chop things up and put logos on pictures. And there's so many exciting, interesting things that are available for me to experiment with today that didn't exist. It's just, it's not, it's going to replace some of the things that people used to do. But there's a lot of interesting opportunities coming up and a lot of creativity ahead of us.
Yeah, I just think it takes a mindset of seeing what can be possible, because I do think that my very limited experience in AI at this point is a lot of people will say, well, I used it. It's almost like they're saying, and I cheated, so I used AI in this situation and it helped me here and look what it did. But it's almost like they're apologizing for using AI,
Yeah.
when in a sense, it could be a very powerful, impactful tool if we just know how to use it and how to embrace it.
Yeah, we've been through this a few times before. Is if you go back and you look at the farming, the agricultural economy of the United States 100 years ago, 120 years ago, we were talking to somebody, and he brought up a video about talking to a farmer who was like 100 years old. His kids run the farm now, but he still works every day. And he said, "What's the most impactful thing that's happened to you in farming in the last 100 years?" And he goes, "Electricity." Like we didn't
Yeah.
have electricity when we started. We're thinking it's something really modern, but we moved massive amounts of our workforce out of the agrarian lifestyle into cities, into other groups. It didn't destroy the economy. People didn't go homeless. There was a transition period that was rough, and we created high schools and did lots of training. We closed the gap on moving to the next state, and we're going to have something like that happen now. But it's not going to destroy the economy. It's not going to make everybody homeless and jobless. It's going to be a rough period, but it's going to create more opportunity, not less.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about leaders. How we touched on this a little earlier, but I'd like to go into it deeper. So you've worked with a ton of leaders, you've worked with a bunch of companies, so you kind of see a lot of people in action. What's the leader of today and the future look like that's different than it was 10 or 20 years ago?
The, the people, I tell you what's interesting. The people that were successful managers up to middle management in the past were really, really good at managing the work. So the people, the work, goals, local things in front of them. So getting sort of solid and almost rigid, sometimes becoming sclerotic or inflexible in the work that they're doing because they have it under control and they're managing it well. The big systems thinking and organizational development and some of those other items existed at a much higher level in organizations. And the big gap in organizations has been that translation from the systems thinkers down to the executors, the strategy to execution play, all of that. As we start to move faster, the leaders of the future are going to have to move much earlier in their careers to understanding systems thinking, sense making and emergence within your teams, paying attention to what's going on, to continuous learning and evolution as we become stronger within your leaders. There's a problem that we have in today's economy right now where middle management is getting stripped out of a lot of organizations because of excessive cost and not driving a lot of stuff. And we're not developing people that are systems thinkers, that understand complexity theory, that understand how to look at the bigger picture, that are strategic in their perspective. I think leaders of the future will take many executive skills or move further down into the organization.
So what you're saying is that it'd be much harder for an employee or somebody within the organization to make the leap from these basic levels into an executive leadership level if they don't have the middle management to learn and grow and make mistakes and figure it out.
Or some other method of continually developing those skills in people. We're losing it today, nothing's replaced it, and it's going to create a vacuum. It could be through training and coaching and cohorts, and maybe something like an org right could step into that spot, start to develop people in the middle to think more systemically. It's kind of what I think is a market space there.
You know, you talk a lot about teams. Your past has been about teams. You help organizations transform by building and getting better at working as teams. How are teams affected by the workforce that's not in the office as much as they used to be? And is that a concern? And how do you deal with that?
Wrote a paper a couple of years ago around getting really, really focused on clarity of outcomes, rituals of alignment. So things that used to happen just sort of dynamically in the office or that didn't take a lot of attention now require specific attention. One of the things that Agile brought to it, which was kind of cool, was you build these backlogs of really clear items. What's the next thing we're going to do? What's the next thing we're going to do? Let's get really clear on it before we commit to it so we can go operate effectively. You didn't have to do that in your accounting department or in your marketing department or the parts of your organization, but that model does a pretty good job of what are the rituals, cadences of conversations that you have, what are the practices and techniques that you use to create alignment, and then how are you going to measure it to make sure you're really on track? With these remote teams, we need to do a lot of that. We led a lot of transformations at LeadingAgile using that model. So when COVID hit and everything got dispersed, we were able to keep our transformations pretty much on track by doing really, really clear organizational outcomes, building on outcomes-based plans, and then having a cadence of alignment, a ritual of alignment, and then measurement of success. So it's going to require disciplined attention to the holes that are created by the disbursement. But at the end of the day, I think it's actually going to be better if you look at the process-based world of before, when lean came in, theory of constraints came in, we started looking at processes. We started automating them, making lines more explicit. By making it be intentionally explicit, they became much easier to manage and improve. Lots of dramatic improvement came because we actually understood the mechanisms that we created value within our organizations. And our knowledge processes today, I don't think we have much transparency or awareness of the value creation process. Some of the creativity you talk about, some of the product work. So I think by making those things more explicit, because it's necessary, because of the distribution of the workforce, it's going to create opportunities for improvement that people don't have today because we can't make sense out of them historically, but we'll have more insights into them in the future.
So we're talking about a lot of terms and philosophies and so on. So let's go to a case study. Now, you don't have to name the company, but just give us an example of a company that you came into and helped transform. What did it look like when it started? What it looked like, when you were finished working with it, and how long did that take?
Company that built medical devices that dealt with insulin and pump, monitor, some software, molecule that they delivered to the pump, and the molecule's very highly regulated. But you can't regulate all of that at the same level. If you connect it all to the compliance of a medicine, it's really hard to move forward. So what we did is we got really, really clear on what the distinct parts of the product were. The software that the doctor used, the person used it on their phone, independent from the device that did the continuous monitoring, independent from the device that delivered through a pump the molecule, created some real clear boundaries around it. Then we built some real clear teaming structures around each of those. So we had a team that was responsible for the software and a team that was responsible for the integration of the CGM and a team that was responsible for creating an overall vision. So we created a bunch of delivery level, relatively independent things because we needed the architecture of the product to mirror the architecture of the organization. We put on top of that a product team, a specific product team, and we made all the decisions and compliance points really explicit. So we articulated the governance model of the flow of decisions across that, made it really, really explicit, set some really clear boundaries, and met very frequently to align all those things. So one of the things that came out of that was governance and compliance things that usually got found very, very late or that were unclear because there was a lack of trust in the organization became built in and verifiable continuously through the process. dramatically accelerating their product cycle internally because they didn't want to go to get approval from regulatory bodies with things that were incomplete or wrong or not supported appropriately. So we fixed it by loading it into the process of the work. It was interesting. The view was that it added work to the system because those regulatory people had to be involved all the time. The designers had to be involved all the time. But when we look at the actual conversations and work and effort that took place, it was actually less total work and things got done faster. It was just more continuous alignment. So we made the governance model explicit. We made the decisioning and regulatory steps explicit. We built them into a cadence of meetings and teams, set explicit responsibilities, and they cut the delivery of their product time in almost half.
Wow. And how long did that take? How long was that
It
process?
was about nine months to get it working,
Okay.
and then another 9 months to get it embedded so that it wouldn't come apart.
Okay. And then when you do something like the case study you just shared with us, is that something that you and your team go in and physically do within the company, or are you just coaching and teaching leaders that then they're expected to lead the change within the company?
That's the pivot I'm in right now. That's the shift. I think in the past we went and did it for them.
Uh-huh.
In the future, I want organizations to be good at doing that because it's not like it can't be a step change. We made a change that changed their regulatory system that will probably be in place for 5 years. But they probably, if they knew how to do it, could continuously improve it, spread other parts of their organization. And so I think particularly in software related companies, maybe not as much where there's something the FDA does create a certain latency to the speed that you can pivot at, right?
Right.
But on software organizations, it can be much faster. So I want to teach them how to go do it themselves by teaching the underlying first principles, some practices, some examples, and then providing oversight. But they don't need an army of frickin' consultants on the ground to do it anymore.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
That's
So,
kind of the responsibility of leadership, right? I mean, that's really your
right.
job. It's not
Well,
just to work, it's to build the
yeah.
organization.
And I can see, having been a CEO myself, I can see that, sometimes people are afraid to let you come in and do that because they think it makes them look weak and they don't know what they're doing. Or, if they feel like if you come in and do all that, then when you leave, what happens? And
Right.
so, there's different things to consider there. So obviously, if the leader who's going to be there for the long haul is the one who implements the change and monitors the change with help from behind the scenes, so to speak, with you and your group, that would probably be the more ideal situation.
And the secret is to create safety for them. The reason why those moves don't take place is because you're not confident you can delegate that work, those decisions. You don't know what it looks like, get the feedback to make sure things are on track. The challenge is and the challenge might be even more at the middle management level than with the senior executives all the time,
Yeah,
who are
sure.
actually more at risk and more concerned about failing and being beaten up kind of on both sides. I think that middle management space has some really interesting work to be done.
Yeah, for sure. What behaviors do you see that executives do that kind of undermine, you know, these great teams working together? So you've seen a lot of things in action. So what do you think happens when it doesn't go well? What are they doing that's undermining that process?
The number one thing that breaks effective team performance is overloading the work on the teams or setting expectations on the teams without creating the conditions for those teams to be successful. Those are kind of related. So I've got 10 things I have to get done this year. I want everybody to work on them all right now. Another great thing comes in, a customer wants that one, I want that one. So now I need to add that into the mix. And all of a sudden teams are working on everything at the same time. There's no way that they can deliver any of them well. The point of strategy is to figure out how to optimize results with the capacity that you have. It's not just to come up with great ideas and shove them into the system. So the thing we see as executive leaders exceeding the capacity or competency of the organization and just expecting results and then demanding those results. And you end up with, maybe you hit the deadlines, maybe you don't. What comes out the back? My old boss, Perot, used to talk about when quick is over, when you do it quick and dirty, and quick is over, all you have left is dirty. You end up with some quick, but an awful lot of dirty. But the people that the executives that related the system don't take responsibility for resolving the dirty that came. And so they're just wallowing in lots and lots of dirty. And it's not fun, right? It doesn't produce good results. You end up accountable for a poorly performing organization or piece of software or product launch. But it's that way because we cut so many corners and you didn't do it. You did the best you could in the circumstances that were created for you. And then you're left accountable for the poor performance. That's the thing. If executives understood the system of value creation a little bit better and understood the necessity of addressing the whole picture, not just like the immediate need, I think we'd make different decisions. I don't think executives are stupid. I don't think that they get the right information or always understand the consequences.
So would you say in that what you just described and all systems are firing well and everything's going well and things, and then this really great idea comes from wherever, sometimes you might just have to let that idea go. Is that what you're saying?
Stop something you're doing.
Yeah.
Stop something you're doing. But the system is designed to produce what it was in front of it 2 weeks ago. It's going to change. The system being the organization, the governance, the policies, the funding, the structures. If the great idea comes in, you have to make a decision. You have 3 options. Don't do the new thing, stop doing something you're currently doing, or create the conditions that's going to be maybe near-term valuable, but is going to create some mess in the end. And that might be the right answer sometimes, but you have to pay attention to when the mud becomes too deep.
You know, another thing that comes to mind too is, I've seen leaders too come in and, again, we're probably getting back to this left brain, right brain thing, but come in with a very compelling spreadsheet and numbers and this is this what we're going to do, but doesn't touch the heart of the people to get it done. So
Yeah.
I do think you got to have both sides of that equation, right?
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Yeah, creating a compelling vision for the future and how it benefits each person. That's a gift, right? That's a gift that a lot of executives have, a lot of good leaders have, the gift to get people to want to follow them. That was one of the guys I used to work with said, what do all leaders have in common? They have followers, right? And they might
Yeah.
follow you for different reasons. They'll follow me
Yeah.
because I'm going to come up with an answer and get you there. They might follow you because you create lots of safety and compassion and understand them. And they might follow somebody else because they generate so much cash for everybody. Like people get followed for a reason, but all leaders have followers.
And I think that a good leader, as you just said, can really paint the picture of what that looks like. If we can do
Yeah.
this and we can do that, and paint that picture so that they can actually see what it's going to be before you get there, I think helps the fear factor where, they don't know where this is going.
That's right. I've said, people talk about command and control in the Marine Corps. Now you were speaking to an Army officer recently, and he was
Yeah.
talking about command and control in the Army. And sometimes that is the right way to move. But the thing I was want to add to that, if you think the Marine Corps is command and control, you've never been a frightened 19-year-old with frightened 18-year-olds that are armed behind you and leading them someplace they don't want to go.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're armed. They don't have to go there if they don't decide to follow you. Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't come from stripes or command and control or regulation or anything. That comes from the esprit de corps, we call it in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
It comes from a belief in each other.
And even you can take it down to like children in the sense that, some interesting parenting is if a parent can really paint the picture for them of what it's going to be like if we do this, or what it's going to be like if you follow through on this and whatever, and really paint that picture, it prepares them, because as a child, there's so much coming at them so fast that if they can't get their head around it, then the natural reaction is to be fearful or freeze.
Yes, that's right. I taught my kids that the process of learning something or getting good at something is way more important than the outcome. Like learning to love the process. They're both very good musicians. My daughter played college basketball, had a very successful career. But you have to learn the journey towards the bigger thing, not like the next step in the outcome. I think that's part of that whole engagement as a leader, creating a hole in people's heart around it.
So let's kind of come back to where we started here. Obviously, you know I'm intrigued about the music side of things. So you say that you still play the violin a bit. You play guitar. What does that do for you now at this stage of your life, at this stage of your career, when you pick that up and play? Is it just pure joy, or does it do something else for
I still keep thinking I'm eventually going to find some talent in there. Just
you?
hasn't actually come out yet. Um, no, the process of making music creates uh, an energy, like that creativity creates a release and an energy and a joy, like you mentioned. It's the ability to play something and play something new in a different way than you've ever played it before. There's a joy that comes out of being able to create things and make some noise and have it not sound horrible. I actually would not be interested in being a famous musician that went out and played the same songs on stage for 25 years. Like, I don't think I'd find joy in that. You know, I probably don't have enough experience with it. Probably could find a way to enjoy it, but picking up something and playing something I haven't played before, learning jazz chords or learning a new finger picking style. For me, it's picking it up and then being able to do it well
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, it is, and I think when I try and tell people what it does for me too is, let's say you're playing a really complicated song, you see something and you say, "Gosh, I really want to play that," and then you look at it and you go, "Oh my gosh, this is really complicated." So when you start trying to make it sound like music, you are digging a ditch. It sounds horrible, and you're
Yeah.
just sitting here thinking, "Oh my gosh," and then all of a sudden out of the blue, if you practice it and get going, whatever, it all of a sudden it starts to sound like what it's supposed to sound like. And you're like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And so, and I kind of look at it in the business world too. Sometimes you're digging a ditch trying to get these systems and these teams working together, and you're thinking, this is horrible, and then all of a sudden, it clicks, and it's like, wow, we should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah, that's true. It's a similar way of thinking about the problem. It's the idea of like, what's the constraint that's getting in the way? I'll take four notes and I'll play it 100 times forwards and backwards till my fingers can do it. And it doesn't sound great to anybody listening. It actually gets it's
Yeah.
not great, but you get it in your fingers and then it's fun. When you're trying to do a transformation or you're trying to get a system installed or you're trying to do some change, there isn't like a playbook of exactly what to go do. You've got to find those four notes that are dissonant right now that you can't do right now and go remove pressure at the constraint. My mind's always looking for that. What's the one thing that's getting in the way? Because
Yeah.
if I fix the wrong problem, I can spend time and money and energy and not improve. What's the thing that's getting in the way? If we could fix that, then we can
Yeah.
go find the next one.
Yeah, you're looking for that muscle memory, that energy flow that just kind of happens when you don't have to sit there and analytically think about it. It just
Yeah.
comes. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dennis, is there anything, in preparation for our discussion today that I haven't asked you or we haven't got into that you want to be sure and get into the program?
Well, I think the one thing that's critically important, and we mentioned already, is just that the skills that can help you move ahead in an organization are available, they're attainable. They're things like understanding systems produce what they're designed to produce, and your organization is a system. Your responsibility as a leader to look at the the thing that's producing the outcome, not just the work that's being done. Like how to look bigger and broader, get your head up and pay attention to what's coming at you. I think those skills are learnable, but not typically built into us in organizations. So if you're looking at your career and concerned about what's going in the future, the creativity, the systems thinking, the strategic thinking, those skills are going to serve you well in the future, even regardless of what comes out with the technology and where things land.
Yeah. At this time of the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Um, Reasonable people don't do unreasonable things, and systems always produce the result they're designed to produce. If you're not getting out of your organization what you're expecting from it, you've created the conditions to get the result that you're getting. Like, look at it differently. So I like that. I like that sort of stopping back and looking, what can I change? Like, systems produce what they're designed to produce, and reasonable people don't do unreasonable things.
And I would assume go along with that too, that you use the word change. And you know, even though you design the system and it's working great and everything's working on all cylinders, you can't just expect that to continue to serve you for the next decade.
That's
You
right.
got always you always change, right?
That's right. There's always a constraint, they say. There's always the next little bit that you can get out of it. Go fix the next constraint.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Well, Dennis, this has been a pleasure talking with you today. It sounds like you've had an amazing career and you're still going strong, obviously, and got a lot to do. And I think your varied background is real intriguing, as we talked a lot about today. So, thanks for your time, and I appreciate your insights. And maybe we'll meet each other down the road somewhere.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It was enjoyable.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Take care. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.